Welcome back to Zilog and Moto. My name is Dave, and this is your look at the realm of 8 and 16-bit Sega consoles and games. One of the great things about doing this channel is not only getting a chance to look at the many games that I never had a chance to play 25 years ago, but to also explore new games that have been produced for the console via relatively recent independent efforts. Previously, I debuted the second season of Zilog and Moto with one of those titles, the exceedingly awesome Xenocrisis, which has seen not just a release on the Genesis, but also on other retro consoles like the Dreamcast and the Neo Geo, and modern consoles and computers. Today's game, the similarly named Coffee Crisis, is a wildly different game, but has seen a similar lifespan, starting out on the Genesis in 2017, before being ported to the Xbox One, Switch, and computers later in 2018, and finally appearing on the PS4 in 2020. And by ported, I mean completely redesigned. They're not labeled as such, but more or less any of the non-Genesis versions of this game have been greatly enhanced with additional features, enemies, levels, power-ups, etc. So I want to be clear, what I'm reviewing today is just the original Genesis Mega Drive version from 2017, and if you decide to check it out on newer consoles or PCs, well, your mileage may vary because from what I've seen, at least of the Steam version when working on this review, it's morphed quite a bit. Coffee Crisis probably sounds like an odd name for a video game, and it definitely stands out in the Genesis library. But it's actually appropriate for the game, and will make more sense in just a second. Independent developer MegaCat Studios from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, opened their doors in 2015 and started out creating two games for the NES, Almost Hero and Duslan, in 2016. Somewhere around that time, the owners of MegaCat Studios met the owners of Black Forge Coffee at a local charity event, and they came up with the idea for a joint game, creating a game about their coffee house. Well, sort of. Anyway, the decision was made to create the game based on that chance meeting, and MegaCat Studios decided this would be a good opportunity to try their hand at a 16-bit platform instead of the NES. And voila, Coffee Crisis was born, the first of 12 games so far that MegaCat has released for the Genesis over the last 5 years. Ah, crap, I'm going to have to track down some more games for the collection. So, what is Coffee Crisis exactly? Well, the Genesis version is a beat-em-up, but more in the vein of the classic Konami beat-em-ups like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or The Simpsons, rather than something like Final Fight or Streets of Rage. Yeah, I can already see some of you out there getting excited at that concept, and I was too. In fact, I bought it immediately when I saw it show up in stock at one of the local disc replays. Beat-em-ups are probably my favorite genre of game, whether they're the older 2D classic arcade style, or a more modern 3D-based game. There's just something really satisfying about taking down wave after wave of punks in hand-to-hand combat without actually having to get off the couch. And the idea of getting to play a new beat-em-up on my favorite retro console, well now you're talking. However, to be clear, and I think we all know this, just because a game is from your favorite genre, whether that's a shooter, RPG, sports title, etc., well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good game. So, did Coffee Crisis live up to the hype train I had rolling in my head? Or did it get derailed shortly after popping in the cartridge? Well, we'll get to all that, but first, our traditional look at the package. And this is Coffee Crisis. What you'll probably notice immediately is that while they used the formatting of the later Genesis titles on the cover, with the red border going up and down the spine of the game, there's no mention of Sega, the Genesis, or the Mega Drive anywhere, even in small print on the back. Now, I'm sure MegaCat Studios did this because it was a completely unlicensed title, and when we actually get to the gameplay, you'll see that the Sega logo, or legal speak, never appears accordingly. But still, it's striking to see, especially when the aforementioned Xenocrisis at least mentioned that it was for use on the Genesis Mega Drive console. My copy is more or less in new condition, and you can see it still looks to be in mint, with no damage to the outer cover anywhere, including the hang tab at the top, which is nice to see in an aftermarket cartridge case. This is a custom case made just for MegaCat Studios, and I'll show you how I know that in a minute. But it feels like a classic Genesis hardbox, so whoever was responsible for producing these for MegaCat appears to have done a good job replicating the real thing. As far as the front cover goes, this is some pretty great artwork. If this is faced out on your shelf, someone's definitely going to take a look at it and be like, hey, what's that game? Just so you know what you're looking at, the cover features the main characters and real-life baristas Ashley and Nick facing off against an assortment of baddies straight from the game. The logo at the top is nice, but I think it probably could have been a bit bigger. It looks better on the manual because the art is cropped slightly differently, but as you'll notice when I flip to the spine, it's practically tiny as there as well. Plenty of room for the 16-bit Mega cartridge though. If I've got to squint to be able to tell what game this is when it's on the shelf, you could have done a better job on the layout. Going over to the back, and this is a decent layout. I think I would have liked to have seen more than 3 screenshots, and they're a little on the dark side for some reason. For instance, it's hard to make out some of the details from the coffee shop level at the top. But all the flavor text is nice and eye-catching, and I like how it's not just green, but also has the swaths of yellow in it as well. It also does a good job selling the game. I especially like the line about crunch through fistfuls of alien meat. Brutal. As I open the package up, I'm going to pop the cartridge out real quick, and you can see what I was talking about as far as these are custom MegaCat boxes, with the MegaCat Studios logo being embossed into the back, in a nice touch on their part. The cartridge looks pretty much like you'd expect a Genesis cartridge to look with a good label, and the manual, at least at first glance, looks like a decent manual, and you can see what I meant about how the Coffee Crisis logo looks best here, balancing out the rest of the cover and the art a bit better. However, as I open the manual, things get a little weird. Well, actually before that, take a look at the placement of the staples. They're not flush with the spine, they're actually closer to the bottom. I don't know if they're all like that or I just got a bad one, but due to that, you have to be careful when opening it up, as to not rip off the cover. Inside the manual, and this should be a shock to any Genesis or Mega Drive fan, it is actually in color, not just black and white. Really like to see that. The manual is of decent length and features art straight from the game, but I don't know, it seems like there's something missing here. Something important. Oh well, I'll think of it in a second, I'm sure. But for now, let's get to some game footage as we take a closer look at the game itself. What's the most critical thing to get right about a video game? Is it making sure that a game has appealing graphics to draw people in from a visual aspect? Or maybe having tons of content available in the game so that gamers have lots of things to do, and don't get bored quickly and move on to something else? Well, both of those things are important, and anyone that's played a game in 2020 knows that for modern titles, having awesome graphics and tons of side things to accomplish are usually in abundance if the game wants to have any hope of being successful in the long run. But neither of those are what I would call the most important. That feature, quite simply, goes to gameplay. Games can have all the great graphics, music, side quests, and other downloadable content that the developers can afford to throw at a title, but if a game isn't fun or engaging to play, then people just aren't going to flock to it, no matter the amount of advertising or hype from streamers. Why am I bringing all this up out of the gate with Coffee Crisis? Well, because, as you might have guessed, there's some very serious issues in relation to gameplay going on here. Beat-em-ups in general have relatively simple control mechanisms, especially ones that start out in the arcades, like the previously mentioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons, both of which utilize only 2 buttons, one for kicking and one for jumping. And Coffee Crisis is no different, with the Genesis version mapping all the features to the standard A, B, and C buttons. But which button does what? Well, let's take a look at the manual. Oh yeah, that's what the manual was missing. Actually having a section that discusses how to play the game. You know, kind of the single most important part of a manual? MegaCat Studios put tons of information into the manual about your characters and all the bad guys, including tons of background information about characters that doesn't really matter, but that is kind of cool to know. However, after having 11 pages of background information and another 5 pages of ads, there's a short story synopsis, a thank you section, which are flipped in order, and a few notes pages. But not a single page on how to actually play the game. I was so shocked by this, I flipped through the manual 3 times before finally accepting that it's just not there. Okay, so I guess I'll try to figure out the game on my own. Like I said, it's a beat 'em up. How hard could it be? I started to play the game and quickly figured out that the B button is used for attacking and the C button is used for jumping. Straightforward enough. But what about picking up weapons? Oh, okay, that's the A button, I guess. A little weird that it's not the attack button, but okay. Boy, that's kind of tough. I'm usually pretty decent at these, and I wiped out in normal difficulty after the 4th level. I've got to be missing something. So I went on the internet for help, and I found nothing. Now, I know Coffee Crisis is an independent release, and at least the Genesis version is going to have a limited fan base in 2020. But I was shocked at how little there is out there about the game. No FAQs, no discussion threads on GameFAQs. It's like no one played this game. And I'm already anticipating the same amount of people for watching this video. I was hoping that perhaps the Steam or Switch versions of the game would possibly have some additional instructions, or perhaps an updated manual in PDF format, but nothing. Not on MegaCat Studios' website, or on Steam, or anywhere that I could find anyway. However, I was able to glean a few things. Apparently, the game does support grab attacks, but rather than just getting close to an enemy and having your character auto-grab, you have to press that A button again, and only certain enemies can be grabbed. And I figured out on my own that you have a pretty useful charge attack as well that's triggered by holding down the B button. But what about this super attack that I keep hearing mention of, and I was able to trigger in the Steam demo version? Well, unlike other beat-em-ups that usually only require hitting a special button or two at the same time, this time it's triggered by hitting the A, B, and C buttons all at the same time. I definitely never would have figured that out if I wasn't just trying anything to get it to trigger. And I know that they had to make a way to launch it for the 3-button controllers, but come on, how do you not map that feature to the X, Y, or Z button for the 6-button controllers? Maybe being that this was their first Genesis production, they didn't know how to program that yet, but this is all a disaster so far. Beyond the missing control instructions, based on the back of the box, Coffee Crisis features 7 caffeinated power-ups to keep your alien bashing blasting on all cylinders. Okay, well that's great, but what are they? You see, this is another thing that really needed to be explained in the manual, and that I wasn't able to find an explanation for on the internet. Some of them are obvious, like picking up a coffee bag gives you an extra life, and various food items or cups of coffee regain bits of health. But some I still have no idea what their purpose is. Maybe just adding points to your score? And one in particular is either a meteorite or a baked potato partially covered in tinfoil. I have no idea. But it seems important because when you pick it up, it stays in the top of the screen near your life/coffee bean counter. If anyone has any idea what this is for, please let me know in the comments. I was hoping that playing the Steam demo of the enhanced version might shed some light on that, but I've got nothing. At this point, I've kind of figured out how to play the game. So, how well does it play? It's okay, I guess. Definitely not bad for a first effort from an independent developer, but do not pop this in your Genesis and expect Streets of Rage. One thing I found was that you can't just go in and unleash the freaking fury on enemies, especially when there's more than one on the screen. Just wading into a group of 3 or 4 enemies without any kind of strategy is not going to go well for you, as enemies don't always stun like you'd expect them to, and you'll end up with someone hitting you. What I found that worked better was taking more of a dink and dunk approach, where you moved in, landed a shot, and then moved back out before taking a hit, and then rinse and repeat. Also, I found it helpful to potentially grab and throw an enemy to thin out the groups of attackers, so learning the specific controls to the game is definitely quite important for your survival. Coffee Crisis Campaign consists of 12 levels, although some are very short and just contain boss fights, or the intro level that just has you taking on 2 aliens in the coffee shop. The game itself isn't very long, although it does feature 3 difficulty levels to choose from if you want to give yourself a challenge. Also, rather than offering the player the chance to continue when they run out of lives, each level has a short password associated with it that can be used to continue your game from the level you died on. I got mixed feelings about this system. On one hand, Streets of Rage 4, that I liked a lot, essentially uses the same system, although in its case, the usage was more due to the length of the game, which is significantly longer than Coffee Crisis. But on the other hand, it seems like this password system potentially makes the game a bit too easy, combined with the fact that the same password will get you into a level in easy versus hard. I'm not going to knock Coffee Crisis for the system too much, because it's better than the alternative of nothing, which probably would make the game far too hard and anything but easy. I'm just pointing out how it's different than most other beat-em-ups. Beyond all the game's quirks when it comes to the manual and gameplay, Coffee Crisis has two clear strengths: the quality of its animation and its background music. From an overall graphics standpoint, it's okay. I like the cutscenes and dialogue at the bottom that link each of the levels and tell you the story of the game. As loose as it is, you kind of just have to go with it in places. The level backgrounds are kind of mediocre though, and while I appreciate that all the levels have a unique look, at least until you get to Alien Planet, I feel like the level art could have been a bit better. Again, first game for an independent developer, I get it, but I don't think the level art is what's going to draw people in. However, the animation for the players and enemies is really good, and you can tell that from a graphic standpoint, this is where most of the effort was placed. It's not the best animation I've seen on the Genesis, but again, if you consider the source, it's a lot better than I was expecting. As far as the background music in the game goes, it's pretty good, with a decidedly rocking soundtrack provided by local Pittsburgh metal band Greywalker, who I'm guessing has probably darkened the doors of Black Forge Coffee a time or two. However, the soundtrack does sound a bit rough in places, which isn't too unusual for the Genesis with its FM-based synthesis, and it sounds like something is missing. I'm not sure if they just needed to have more storage on the cartridge so it could have some clear sounding samples, or if perhaps there's a better audio driver that it could have used to produce the music, but there's some definite room for improvement in the quality of the sound of the music. The bigger problem is the sound effects in the game, or more appropriately, the lack thereof. One of the things that's key in any beat-em-up is the feeling that you're actually fighting with someone, and having great sound effects is just as important to that feeling as the graphics on the screen and the controls. For some odd reason, the game has only a few sound effects, and when you're wailing on an enemy, or they're hitting you, silence. This is a huge missed opportunity, and along with the unconventional beat-em-up controls, it just takes you out of the game. All in all, and this is a really hard rating for me to hand out due to where this game came from and its overall concept, I have to give Coffee Crisis 1 star. While I love the fact that independent developers are keeping older consoles alive with new releases, this is a game that is clearly from a team that had some great ideas, but that just didn't quite know how to implement them yet. And if you're really curious about the title, pick up the enhanced version on Steam or one of the other modern consoles, because those versions appear to have been what the designers originally had in mind when not limited to the Genesis console. But this version, this is only for completists, and I can't in good conscience recommend it unless you just have to own every beat-em-up for the console. But I'm hopeful that later Mega Cat Studios games will turn out better, with lessons learned from this title. I guess we'll just have to see. Okay, and that was Coffee Crisis. I've got to say, after playing aftermarket titles like Xenocrisis and Darius, I got a bit spoiled and just expected every post-1998 release for the Genesis to be great, due to developers having 20 years to learn how to get everything out of the hardware and cheaper access to ROM chips to allow for more storage. But I should have known better. And to the guys at Mega Cat Studios, I want to stress that I fully support your efforts as an independent developer. Hell, I bought the game. But I wouldn't be doing the other games I've reviewed on the channel a proper service to award a better rating to this title. Next week is back to the Master System. I'll be reviewing a game that I just picked up for the console a few weeks ago, and like usual, I've never played it before, and I'd never actually even heard of it until starting this collection. I'll give you a hint, it was released in the United States as part of a combo cartridge with one game, and then it was released in Europe as a combo cartridge with a completely different title. Remember, whatever you like to play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.